Hi guys, welcome back to Elizabeth Ann Reads. I'm Anne, and today we're here to talk about Dewey's 24-hour readathon. Dewey's is my absolute favorite readathon of the year. It happens twice a year, once in April, once in October. I've been participating since I think 2015. So this will be my 12th Dewey's. If you don't know, I will leave their website linked below, but it is a 24-hour readathon where the goal is to make a priority of reading for those 24 hours. No, you do not have to read for the full 24 hours. You can try. I always sleep for a few hours. But the goal is just to make it much more of a priority than you normally would. Carve out extra time in your day to fit in as much reading as you can. And that can include, listening to audiobooks while you clean or exercise, reading with your kids, whatever it looks like for you. That's it. There's no rules. It's just a 24-hour period where you make reading a priority. If you've never checked it out, I highly encourage you to check out the website. There's a group on Goodreads. There's a group on Facebook. So you can find a group that's doing it probably on whatever social media platform you use. So get connected. Please participate. It's so much fun. And what's really fun is that it happens in the same 24 hours around the world. So depending on what time zone you're in, your starting time will be different. I'm on the west coast of the US, so I start at 5 a.m. If you're on the east coast, at EST, you start at 8 a.m. If you're, in the UK or Europe, you're going to start much later than that. So there's a spot on the website where you can find your starting time. So it's just 24 hours. You can connect with people around the world and just have a great time read. If this will be your first time participating, you should go check out this video. I think it's up here. I did a video last year on tips and just things you should know going into the readathon, so be sure to check that out. And again, I'll leave their website linked below. But today's video is all about the 5 books you should read during the 24-hour readathon. And no, this is not 5 specific books you should read, although I have recommendations if you need them. But I'm going to talk about the 5 types of books that you should have on your stack, and I will give you a few recommendations for each of those types of books. Now, again, disclaimer, I know everyone does readathon a little bit differently. Some people really love to dive into, big, thick books and just lose themselves in a single world for the whole time. That's not me. I like variety. I like to mix it up. I like to feel accomplished by completing books. So I tend to have a pretty wide variety and lots of options that I can, kind of pick and choose from. And switch out when I need to. So if you're like me, these are the 5 types of books you should have on your readathon stack. The first type is books with quick moving plots, books that kind of pull you in and you just want to read and find out what happens next. Usually I think these are going to be things like suspense or thrillers. Now I do not read a lot of suspense and thrillers. This is not my genre. You can find people on BookTube that can give you much, much greater recommendations than I can. And many, many more. But I do want to recommend 2 that I think work great for readathon. The first is The One by John Marrs. This is a thriller that is set in a slightly future world where there is an online dating service that matches you with your one true match. It uses your DNA to find your perfect DNA match. And it follows 5 individual stories, 5 different, storylines of 5 different characters and how this affects their lives. You've got really short chapters. You're continually jumping from perspective to perspective. So you always want to read like, oh, I want to get back to this person. I want to get back to this person. Most chapters are just, 2 or 3 pages long. And you just move really, really quick. I did read this one during a 24-hour readathon. And it's a great choice. I would also recommend Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I'm sure everyone knows what this is about. It's been pretty popular the last few years. This follows Jason, who's a scientist who gets accosted on his way home from work one day. Blacks out. When he wakes up, he is back in his life, but it's not quite his life. He discovers very, very quickly that things are not as they should be. His wife is not his wife, etc. And it follows his journey of trying to figure out what happened and trying to fix it. Highly recommend. I did not originally read this one during a 24-hour readathon, but I've recommended it multiple times as a good fit for that. The next type of book I want to suggest is short stories or novellas. So books that you just move through more quickly. And again, not really my forte. I don't read a lot of short stories. I'm not generally a fan of them, but I always try and have something that's shorter on my stack. Often that will be something like fairy tales. These fairy tales are super short. They're usually 1 to 3 pages each. So a collection of fairy tales is a great option. Also, this is the one I'm going to be picking up this year. This is The Happy Prince and Other Stories by Oscar Wilde. These are fairy tales. These are children's fairy tales by Oscar Wilde. You can see I've actually already started it, but I will definitely be reading a few more of these during the readathon. Find, pick an author you like and see if they have a collection of short stories. Find a collection of short stories that's your preferred genre. The other author I am going to recommend is Connie Willis. She writes science fiction, and she is one of the few authors that I really trust to do short stories well. This is The Winds of Marble Arch, but there's other collections of her short stories, and I would definitely recommend finding something of hers and reading it. You can find a lot of them online too, and just reading through one of her short stories. It's a great way to get introduced to Connie Willis. Another type of book I always like to have on hand is middle grade. Middle grade books tend to be lighter, pretty quick reads. They tend to be kind of fun and can be very whimsical. I tend to avoid really heavy stuff during a readathon. So I always like to have a few fun middle grade on my stack. I have a few to recommend. You can look all over BookTube for good middle grade recommendations, especially since we just passed middle grade March. But a few that I would recommend, and as I look at them, none of these are like super, super light, but they're all pretty engaging. The first I would recommend is The Giver by Lois Lowry. If you haven't read this, this is a middle grade dystopian. Reads super fast. Again, it's going to draw you into the story. You're just going to work your way through it really quick. Bob by Wendy Mass and Rebecca Stead. This is the story of a little girl who goes to live with her grandmother, goes to visit her grandmother, who hasn't met or hasn't seen in years since she was a toddler, basically. And so she's staying with her grandma and starts to remember things that she had forgotten about her first visit there, and discovers Bob. Super, super cute, heartwarming. I would also recommend the Enola Holmes series. This is The Case of the Missing Marquess. These, again, I didn't originally read during a readathon, but I've reread them during readathons. They're great. They're mysteries that follow Sherlock Holmes' kid sister. Really fun, quick reads. A little bit on the darker side, but very, very enjoyable. I would also recommend Furthermore by Tahara Mafi. This is a very whimsical fantasy novel following Alice, who lives in this world where everyone has a certain talent, and she doesn't seem to. And just her journey and she ends up going kind of on a quest, and it's very Alice in Wonderland-esque. Some people don't like this. It's a little too kind of abstract for them, but I love this one, and I originally read it during a 24-hour readathon, and I think it's a great read. All right, next up, I would recommend books with illustrations. Especially as you get later into the readathon, your eyes may start to get tired, your brain may start to get tired, and to have books with more pictures is super, super helpful. Obviously, graphic novels or manga are a good way to go. Again, I don't read a lot of those. I usually have one or two, and they're usually fine, but nothing that I'm just raving about. I do want to recommend this graphic memoir, which is Quiet Girl in a Noisy World by Debbie Tung. A lot of people have read Book Love, who's the same author. I like this one a lot better. Book Love was just kind of mediocre to me, but I loved this one, just approaching life as an introvert and what that looks like. So would definitely recommend that. Definitely pick up graphic novels or manga, whatever works for you. But also, I would recommend children's books, like picture books. Don't feel like you only have to read, big, heavy adult books. Pick up a children's book. They're great. Children's books are a great palette cleanser between other things. You go through them quick, 10 minutes, you finish the book, you get to look at some fun pictures, and you're still reading. I always recommend Beatrix Potter. Her stories, again, you can get through in 5 or 10 minutes. They're a lot of fun. If you're tired of Beatrix Potter, which you shouldn't be, because no one should ever be tired of Beatrix Potter, but if you need something different, I would pick up The Complete Brambley Hedge. This is by Jill Barklam. I think I'm going to be picking this up as a reread this time. It has stories that follow the seasons, so I think I'm going to read the spring story. This is all about mice, and again, it has great illustrations of these houses they build inside trees. Look at that. So I would definitely recommend Brambley Hedge. Or find other kids' books. Go back and reread some of your favorites. Go to the library and just pull a couple random ones on off your shelf. Read some Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss has been in the news lately. I would pick up one of his books. I would recommend The King's Stilts. This is a pretty obscure one, but it's actually one of my favorites, if not my very favorite. Story about the king and his stilts and his kingdom and what happens when it's kind of attacked. Great story. Also, children's nonfiction is a great way to start learning about stuff, and again, illustrations. This is Thomas Jefferson Builds a Library by Barb Rosenstock, and it has just incredible illustrations and all kinds of information about Jefferson and how he kind of built the first library in America, his passion for books, and how that was acted out in his life. Great, really interesting book. So find some picture books and include those in your stack. Don't be ashamed of reading picture books. They're fantastic. And then the last thing I want to recommend having on your stack is rereads. Obviously, I can't recommend specific books for this because I don't know what you've read, but find some old favorites. Again, these are great, again, when you're tired and your brain's maybe not fully functioning. Go to those things that are familiar. For me, that might be like the Chronicles of Narnia, or anything by Ellen Montgomery, Anne of Green Gables, or one of her collections of short stories, maybe. Again, maybe some middle grade that you love. I may pick up The Princess Bride by William Goldman this year and reread that one. So find something that's comfortable and familiar and that you really love, so when you start to feel a little slumpy, you can go to those kind of tried and true books that you already know are going to be winners. So that is it. Those are the 5 types of books I recommend having on your Readathon stack. Let me know down below, what did I miss? What are other types of books that you feel like you should always have on your stack? Or what are some of your favorites that fall into these categories? What have you found to be tried and true Readathon books? I am always looking for ways to improve my Readathon experience. And yeah, I would love to know what your recommendations are. So that is it. I hope you have a fantastic Readathon, and thank you for watching.